Can't think what I was going to say. All right, so who said the soul thinks without a picture? And today's data, before you guys answer, we'll get this in a second. So again, who said the soul cannot think without a picture? And today's show is going to be on metadata, all about it, everything you needed to know, and stuff we don't even know about it. So we'll be back in just a moment. All right, so who said?
Aside from yourself?
Aside from myself, yeah. The soul cannot think without a picture. Who said? Come on, answer's right there, Clinton, right in front of you.
Aristotle.
Very good. Who was? Which I thought was
a Greek philosopher.
Yeah, a Greek philosopher. So I thought that was quite interesting. I'm speaking, camera over here, me. Okay, so today's topic is it's all about metadata. Why do we need to know about this information? Any ideas, guys?
It is a useful way of cataloging and understanding what the image was taken with and how it was taken.
Right, so here's something I didn't know because I always called EXIF stands for Exchangeable Image File Data. So that's one of the things, that's part of it. And then we also have a different part of it, which is IPTC, which is the International Press Telecommunication Council, which is part of your copyright information. So there's two different portions of it. I didn't realize that until this morning. I worked on this yesterday, all day yesterday, and just went blank for all the things that we were discussing on this stuff. So I sat down this morning and reviewed it again. It's like, oh.
It's always a good idea.
It's always a good idea. Okay, so why do we care about this information, first off? So I'm going to go to Lars and say, well, what did you do in film days?
In film days, lots of notes. If you were, quite often you get people, they look at a photograph and go like, oh, what did you do? How did you take that? What exposure did you use? That kind of stuff. What lens did you use? And you're going like, where's my notes? And you pull them out and check them. Nowadays, of course, you don't have to do that. No,
it's all buried within the, with actually when you take the picture. Some of it is buried within in the picture. So how do we pronounce that? EXIF?
EXIF.
EXIF?
EXIF.
EXIF? Good point. Okay, EXIF. EXIF. Google it. That information is taken every time you click the shutter, and it's buried within. Now also, on some cameras, I know on the Canon, I don't think it's on my Sony, and also you stick in my name. I used to be able to put my name in the back of it as well.
That's not the only one. The Olympus allows me to put in that and copyright information as well.
All right. Yeah. So every time I notice, I don't think it's on my Sony. I'd have to check that again. I don't think I found it. But then again, the menu is not the most cooperative that I've ever found.
Most cameras aren't.
Canon I found, and I think Nikon is pretty, more or less pretty straightforward on some side of it. I just find the Sony just took me it probably took me a good 4 or 5 months to actually get used to using the menu in the Sony. That's the only downfall I find about it. Okay, so what can we do? Once we have that information, what can we do with it? Clinton?
A lot of different things with the EXIF data. One thing that is really useful is the ability to recall how you shot an image, what you did with that image, and even on some of them, even where it was shot. So it allows you to go back without actually having to go through notes or further reference material to figure out how you took an image. And it can also show you what you did wrong with an image as well, because it was stored shutter speed, aperture, and even your white balance and your metering modes were all stored in the EXIF data.
Yeah. One of the things to note also, even when you take the picture, you can look at the EXIF data immediately because you have the function. I have it on mine and I had it on my Canon. I'm sure every camera does. You have that option to look at that information immediately after the capture, so it puts it right there for you, along with, depending on what your settings are set to, along with your histogram and things like that as well. As for a learning tool, it's a great way of using it for a learning tool, especially if you want to go back to your older images and see what you had used it before, had shot at before at this location. So on that side of it, it's absolutely tremendous on that part of it. I would have to say it's one of the better things. And you who's teaching at North Island College, it's a handy thing to use for checking out your students and how they shot the picture. If they
Exactly.
Go ahead.
One thing that I find it really useful for is when my students come in, they were wondering what went wrong with an image or why is it blurry. The easiest way for me to find out is actually to go into the properties of the phone, look up the EXIF data. I know shutter speed, I know aperture, I can see it all, and I can tell them if you were on a tripod, that shutter speed is why you got the blur, or you were using the wrong white balance, and I can actually go through with them and show them how to improve their images, and it also allows me, when I'm looking at assignments, to see if they met the criteria I set out for them as well.
Yeah, and some cameras nowadays will do GPS. So Lars, does
I haven't actually explored that part myself. I don't know if it does do a GPS. I mean, the camera doesn't have a GPS chip in it, so
okay.
I don't think it would. Where I use it myself primarily, or have used it, is just mainly just embedding my own information in each image. We post a lot of our images online nowadays, so it's a really good way to have a little protection there for yourself.
Well, that brings us back to the other side, the IPTC, which is the International Press Telecommunication Standards, where you can enter your copyright information.
Correct, yeah.
Give notes, title your image, things like that, which is a great way of doing information. Here's another point. Do you title all your images?
It depends, only the ones I processed I will title. And I used to come up with some very elaborate file names for these things in the past because my first job, obviously in photography, was photographic technician in the Air Force. So we always did, we had an elaborate negative name for the negative, right? So every negative we filed, we would have the negative number plus, what base it was taken at, in this case, CX, Comox. A few other bits of information like that. And that just carried on. So I came up with this elaborate code, and I just realized after a while I still had no clue what the heck it was after the fact. So I tend to sort of like, when I name them, I also have them in folders, and usually by date or year. And that keeps it a little bit more.
Well, yeah, okay, I understand that. I'm more interested in because you were working in a more or less studio environment.
Correct,
with
yeah.
lots of photographers kicking around. So how did you know which images were yours? Did you file them under your name?
We all had, well, in the Air Force it was easy. We had a number.
Okay.
That was ours, right? Afterwards, I kept, when I was working in the civilian world in a studio, I kept all my negatives. So.
Well, yeah, in the
Yeah.
studio, the negatives are all yours, but I know in the military side of it, it's like,
No.
But
Copyright D&D.
there's probably 5 or 6 guys in the department
Yeah.
that were working there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how do you know who shot what?
Well, like I said, when you filed your negatives, what you would do, you had a number, your particular number, and that would go in the actual on the envelope that the negatives were stored in. So with the information like CX for Comox, and then there'd be a couple of little indicators there. Usually the year and date was in it,
Yep.
and then of course your number, and then I think a negative number as well.
Which is interesting because I don't think the Canadian military works the same as the American military. I believe the American military, a lot of it is common licensing, even though you're being paid. The licensing is owned by the government and they release those images. I don't think the Canadian government's like that at all. I don't think those are in the public domain. I know a lot of
The ones that we filed were all property D&D.
Right.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? It's a different one. Different subject. We just ran
And
off
there's
on the
probably
other
someone
side.
out there that's going to correct me on that. It's been a few years since I've done this, but
Yeah, okay. So back to EXIF. EXIF. We need this information. We can use it as a learning tool. We can put under parts of it name, place, copyright, description of it. Can we modify it? That's another thing that we like to do. Most of us use Lightroom. I use Lightroom. Clinton, I don't think you use anything at this particular time.
Playing with Lightroom.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay, we got Clinton playing with Lightroom, so that's a good thing. So you don't need Lightroom or Photoshop, and there are programs to put it in and there are programs to take it out. For me, if you were to, and in fact I did this for you yesterday as well, if I go into Google and I put in photos by Bob Wilde or photos by Lars Olson, I didn't do you yesterday, I actually get this, it actually comes up with my images. So if I go to the images under Google, it shows you a lot of images that are copyrighted or tagged by Bob Wild. So I thought that was a pretty good idea as well. That's a great way, because if you're putting your stuff out onto the internet, you never know who's got them.
That's correct.
They can go anywhere. But if somebody was looking for, like, I've got stuff all over the place. I've got stuff in Flickr. I've got stuff in 500 pixels. I've got 500 pixels didn't show up. I've got stuff that other people have used on their website. And as long as I've got my name on it, it'll come back, which I thought was quite interesting. And I never thought of doing that. Mm-hmm. So the next time you're sitting around, you go, well, Bob said this, try it. Photos by, and put in your name. Put in your name. So I thought that was actually pretty good. So there are free tools out there. Now there's another free, well, semi-tool that you can use. It's called Pixel Peepers. Have you heard of Pixel Peepers?
I have heard of pixel peepers, but I was referring to people who pixel peep.
Right, and I'll admit it, I'm one of them. I pixel peep. But there's a program out there, Pixel Peepers, I think it's pixelpeepers.com. Yeah. Well, really?
Who knew?
That will actually give you the settings, and it also gives you the Lightroom settings that you made to it.
Oh, wow. So all your editing information, that's wild.
All your editing information. So if you made adjustments in Lightroom, it'll give you that information as well. I was playing with it last night. So cool. I'd heard of it before. It really wasn't a useful thing for me to do, but they've added and changed it, and now it'll actually give you the settings of what was in Lightroom. There's a free version and a paid version. So the free version will only allow you to upload your own images. Mm-hmm. The paid version, I don't know what it cost, I didn't look, will actually allow you to see other people's work and see what they used in the Lightroom. Because Lightroom basically is a standard at this particular time. So if you're looking, and then you can save that profile and add it to your Lightroom collection of profiles. So it's like, when you start looking for stuff, it's like, wow, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of interesting. So there are other tools out there as well that you can add for. I looked up very quickly, I just put in EXIF tools, and I come up with Copilot, what else? EXIF tools, and they look pretty good. I didn't download them and test them, but I certainly could very easily. So the other side of the question is now I'm adding this information, or I'm modifying the information that's in there. Can anybody think of a reason why we wouldn't want it in there?
I can't.
Neither can I.
No, but
I find it annoying when it's not.
This is true. There might be, the only reason I can think of is if you're a professional photographer and you're making tons of money off this thing, and I mean like a really good living. So like if we're looking at Peter Luck, things like this, and he's doesn't want to put his information out there and what actually it was. You don't want people to go and take the same image. See, as photographers, we're bad at this, and I know you guys do it. If I see a great image, I'll go to that spot and I'll try to duplicate it, or I'll try to put my own twist on it, and things like that. We're bad at that. So a lot of times, if I know the information, I've got a starting point. When we were writing the course for waterfalls and the fireworks, I went back to all my pictures, and that's how I did it. I looked up my EXIF information, and then I knew what I was looking for. And my case in point was when I was doing fireworks, I thought I was shooting at about 10 seconds. Some were, but a lot of the earlier shots were only 1, 2, 3 seconds. Mm-hmm. So on that side of it, it was pretty good. The other thing I want to talk about is the GPS coordinates. Some cameras will automatically have GPS in it. Which is good. Mm-hmm. The other thing I can do in Lightroom, and anybody who's using Lightroom, you have a GPS function to it, so you can actually click on that image and then go place where it was taken on the maps. Mm-hmm. So have you ever used it?
Not me personally, no.
What are you guys doing? Not playing it off with computers. I've only used it a couple times. It's really helpful if you're uploading images for Google and things like that. I find it just picks it out and throws it in the right spot if you're uploading your pictures to help with maps and Googles and things. A lot of us do that. We've done that as well. Anything else you guys want to discuss?
Oh yeah, put me on the spot.
Well, I'm nudging Clinton here. Chimping.
Chimping.
There we go.
What is chipping? Now that you've nudged me.
We nudged you because you didn't know what it was. Watch Lars.
Click. That's what it is. And we all do it.
We all do it. There's no doubt in my mind, we all do it. It's interesting because for me, I do a lot of HDR, high dynamic range. So multiple shots put into one. So on that side of it, I will take the image first of what I want and get a good starting point, and then I'll take my minuses and pluses of that. So I do chipping mainly to get what I want right away, check it, make sure I've got a good histogram on it.
Just going to say that, yeah.
Well, see, my big thing is like if I could get rid of everything off the back of the camera and just give me a histogram, I'd almost be happy with that. If I could, I shoot by my histogram. I live by my histogram. You don't?
Odd. No.
Why is that odd?
Because your histogram is a guide. It's not meant to be lived by.
I heavily just look at my. I use heavily.
Yeah. It'll show you
depend
whether
on my
you got any detail in the shadow areas or whether your highlights are blown out. And those are important things to know. That way you can make an adjustment on the spot with your exposure. I mean, most often I'm using my histogram. There are times when I tend to forget if I'm shooting quickly. It just depends on the situation.
Well,
but
it could
I do
be, yeah,
use
if
it.
you're shooting sports and things like that, there's no way you're going to be doing a lot of,
Oh, no.
lot of chimping.
No.
It's, a lot of us do landscape, macro
Yes.
photography. On that side of it, I will depend heavily on the histogram at that particular time. You do macro photography.
Yeah.
You're not looking at your histogram? What are you guessing through the...
I don't guess, no. Again, if I'm not sure, I'll check my histogram, but generally speaking, I know what I'm after.
Yeah, okay, so it's one of those things, well, we generally know what we're after, but when you take a picture and look at it in the back of the camera, it's fairly small.
Correct.
It really doesn't give me enough information for me, again, to go pixel peeping so I can get in there and take a look nice and close to make sure all the leaves are not blown out or all the leaves haven't moved on me.
The screen on the back of the camera too is not really something you can't judge the exposure by looking at the image on the screen, because the
Look up your screen. Look at the size of the screen on that. That's
big.
Yeah.
The reason why is because you can actually increase or decrease the brightness of the screen, so you're not really going to see the image exactly the way it was shot.
Correct.
So like you were saying, that's what makes that histogram even more important, because that's about the only real guide you have to gauge that exposure, right?
Right, but this is what I mean. So here's my phone. My cell phone is larger than the screen on the back.
Mm-hmm.
Look, you can hold up here. I know we're going to come this
You want a
direction.
hand?
No. We're going to zoom in here. See, look at the difference between those two items there. My cell phone gives me a larger screen to look at than the back of the camera does.
And sometimes more of a color gamut on the cell phone too.
Well, you know what? A lot of times I find my exposure is the way I shoot. I'm always off by probably half, up or down. You find the same thing? My exposure is always usually out by half.
Depends. I know when I shot Nikon many years ago, the cameras tended to underexpose slightly.
Mm-hmm.
So generally I would always make a correction depending on the lighting situation.
Well, in film days, you
Yeah.
could make corrections. You're kind of.
No, we
Yeah.
had another tool called bracketing. There was a line actually Art Wolf had one time there. He was leading a group of photographers on a workshop, and he pointed down, I guess there was a bunch of animals down in this gully, and he says, hey, let's go down there and shoot the hell out of them and bracket like hell.
Wasn't the joke I was thinking of. But I can see how you kind of get along with that one. So on that side of it, it's a different way of doing it. Like I said, it's the way I shoot. It's the way I learned. That's not the way I learned, I guess. Go ahead.
With the histogram, you have to know how to read it, and you also have to at least get close in order for it to be useful.
Correct, but we've done a show on histogram.
We have.
So on that side of it, if you don't understand the histogram, go back through our previous shows. There is one there dedicated to histogram and how important it is. So on that side of it. So let's kind of get back on track here again. So the EXIF data, you can modify it. There are times. I think, if I'm correctly, I have to check this out. I'll put a note under the YouTube things. I'm pretty sure, I do a lot of HDR, so I know the EXIF data comes in when I do through Photomatics, but I sometimes think Photoshop wipes it out. There's one of these things that is actually wiping it out for me. There's
When
a
you
program.
do photo stacking, it will, because it doesn't know which data to pick, especially if you've got your shutter speed and your aperture that are always changing with your HDR stuff.
Yeah.
It's true.
And I know
multiple images where you're
exposures.
working with different, like if you're doing a composite in Photoshop, again, you're messing that up.
You're
And it'll just clear it out.
But I can still put back my copyright information, the title and things like that. I know for a fact some of my images, the date and timestamp were wrong. I forgot to, because we go with daylight savings time, the camera doesn't automatically do that. So I know in Lightroom I was able to go back in, and the cool thing, and I think I showed this in one of my tips, if you're going back to my YouTube channel, how to change these things, you can do multiple images. You don't have to do one at a time. I can click on a row of 5, 10, 15, or the whole set, and I can go in and change the date and the time on it, which I found to be very, very useful. I don't know if these free tools will do that, but I know for me, why use, there's another thing. How many weddings have we shot?
A few.
Yes, Lars, the other ones, oh God, I can't count them. You're shooting with 2 people, shooting digital. How many of us have actually forgot, because you're in the wedding, you forgot to set and make sure that both of you set at the right time. Synchronize the time on the cameras. That way, it's easy to separate by cameras in Lightroom, but synchronize your time in the cameras, and that way you've got a complete day. I know in the last wedding we shot with one of my good friends back in Winnipeg, we forgot to do that. And so one of us was out by a couple of hours. So when we tried to put, as the sequence went through for a slideshow, we had to do it manually. It took us hours to do things like that, where it should have taken us like a moment or two in Lightroom. So
The importance of checking your camera settings before you do a shoot.
it is, but there are times you just kind of forget. You kind of forget. So to top it up, Clinton, I'm going to let you top it up. Why do we need to know it?
It helps us index and also learn from our mistakes and also redo things that we've had success with.
Yeah, totally great teaching tool. Totally great teaching tool. I think it's one of those things that's underutilized.
I swear by it, and I even get, the first thing I teach my students generally is how to find the EXIF data.
Yep.
Because honestly, it is something that the cameras do, and it is a good way to learn how to shoot. And it even, if you have a question like, why did my picture come out dark? Your EXIF data will give you the baseline for it. And if you understand aperture and shutter, then you can definitely figure out what you did wrong or what you did right.
Aperture, shutter, ISO.
White balance and metering.
White balance and metering, and away you go. Any last words, Lars? You got 43 seconds.
No pressure.
None at all.
No pressure.
No, but it's good information. Definitely check it out. Try some of the tools that Bob mentioned, Color Pilot, EXIF tools, for example. Google it. If you have Lightroom, check it out as well. Go in your camera's menu, see if you actually can modify those settings. You'd be surprised. Like I said, with my Olympus, I was quite surprised I could add in my information, which I thought was really good, and my copyright information.
Oh, yeah, no, totally agree. All right, so that's all I have. We will see you next time. Before we go, thank Shaw for using their studio, Cumberland Crate Company for using their crates as tabletops. And we'll see you next time on Who Said Photography. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Night night.